"You're in danger. Run away and don't say anything to your daughter." This burst out of the receiver during Christmas dinner. The warmth of the holiday contrasted with the icy warning from an unknown number. I decided to trust the stranger and ran away. That decision tore apart family secrets, where betrayal was masked as concern. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The phone vibrated against the scratched surface of my coffee table, and Clementine's name lit up the screen like an accusation. I stared at it through 2 full rings before picking it up. 3 months? That's how long it had been since we'd spoken. "Daddy, I've missed you so much." Her voice poured through the speaker, thick as honey, sweet as poison. "Nicholas and I want you here for Christmas dinner. It's been too long." I walked to the window, pressing my forehead against the cold glass. Rain streaked down, blurring the Portland streetlights into watercolor smudges. Something in her tone made my jaw tighten. 3 months, I said, keeping my voice level. "You haven't called in 3 months, Clementine." I know. She rushed through the words like they were obstacles to clear. "Work has been crazy, but family is important. Please come. We need you there." Need. The word hung in the air between us, and I turned it over in my mind the way I used to examine discrepancies in ledgers. My daughter had never been good at hiding things from me. When she was 7 and broke my reading lamp, her confession came tumbling out before I'd even noticed the damage. Now she was 34, and that transparent little girl had become someone I barely recognized. "What time?" I asked, after a pause that stretched too long. 6 o'clock. Don't be late." Her voice pitched higher, faster. "And Daddy? Where's something nice?" After she hung up, I sat at my small kitchen table in this apartment that had become my world 2 years ago. The place smelled like instant coffee and old newspaper. Nothing like the house I'd raised Clementine in, the one with the bay windows and the oak tree out front where she'd built fairy houses as a child. That house now belonged to her and Nicholas in everything but legal paperwork. Temporary, they had said when they moved in. Just until Nicholas's contracting business got off the ground. Just until they saved enough for their own place. I'd believe them because I wanted to. Because after my wife Margaret passed, that house felt too big and too quiet, and having my daughter close seemed like a gift. I pulled the photo album from the shelf, its leather cover worn soft from handling. Young Clementine smiled up at me from a dozen pictures, gap-toothed at 6, gangly at 12, radiant in her high school graduation gown. When had she changed? When had warmth become calculation? The signs had been there if I'd wanted to see them. 3 weeks ago, Nicholas had cornered me in what used to be my garage. "You still got that life insurance policy?" he'd asked, trying to sound casual while reorganizing my tools. "The big one through your old accounting firm?" $850,000, I'd answered, watching his eyes light up like slot machine cherries. "That's solid, real solid." He'd nodded, running his hand along my workbench. "Clementine's the beneficiary, right?" Then last month, Clementine had started asking about my will. Offhand questions over coffee that weren't offhand at all. "Have you updated it recently, Daddy, since Mom passed?" Her fingers had traced the rim of her mug, not meeting my eyes. "It's important to keep these things current." I closed the album and walked back to the window. My reflection stared back, 67 years old, graying beard trimmed neat, eyes that had spent 40 years finding errors in other people's numbers. Those eyes had taught me to trust patterns, to recognize when something didn't add up. This didn't add up. 3 months of silence, then a Christmas invitation delivered with forced cheer and desperate insistence. Nicholas's insurance questions. Clementine's inheritance concerns. I laid them out in my mind like columns in a spreadsheet, and the total pointed somewhere I didn't want to look. But I was going anyway, because despite everything, despite the suspicion coiling in my gut like barbed wire, some foolish part of me still hoped. Hoped that my daughter's voice would warm when she saw me. Hoped that this invitation meant she'd remembered who I was, who we'd been to each other before Margaret died, and everything shifted sideways. I picked up the red pen from my desk and marked December 24th on the calendar hanging by the refrigerator. The circle I drew looked like a target. 3 weeks to wait, 3 weeks to carry this knot of dread around in my chest. 3 weeks to wonder if I was paranoid, or if my accountant's instinct for spotting fraud was finally turning itself on the person I love most. The rain had picked up, hammering against the window in steady rhythm. Somewhere out there, in my old house with its warm lights and familiar rooms, My daughter and her husband were planning something. I could feel it the way you feel weather changing in your bones. I touched the photograph one more time, Clementine at 8, holding a Father's Day card she'd made from construction paper and glitter. "World's best dad," it had said in crooked letters. "What are you planning, Clementine?" I whispered to the empty apartment. The question fell into silence, unanswered. But December 24th was coming whether I wanted it to or not. Christmas Eve settled over Portland like a wet blanket. I sat in my car outside the house, my house, though it hadn't felt like mine in 2 years, watching rain streak the windshield into abstract patterns. The windows glowed warm yellow, but the sight filled me with cold instead of comfort. 3 weeks had crawled by since Clementine's call. 3 weeks of interrupted sleep and circular thoughts. Now the moment had arrived, and every instinct I possessed screamed at me to drive away. Instead, I turned off the engine and stepped into the rain. The walkway to the front door seemed longer than I remembered. My finger hesitated over the doorbell, but before I could press it, Clementine opened the door. She wore a red dress, pearls at her throat, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Daddy, you made it!" She pulled me into a hug that felt rehearsed. Her perfume, something floral and expensive, made my nose itch. Come in, you must be freezing." The dining room table was set with Margaret's good china, the pieces I'd boxed up and left behind. Candles flickered in silver holders. Nicholas stood by the sideboard, pouring wine into crystal glasses with theatrical precision. "Otis." He nodded at me, managing to make my own name sound like an insult. "Glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," I lied, settling into the chair Clementine indicated. The seat faced away from the door. I didn't like that. Dinner started with small talk that felt like walking through a minefield. Clementine asked about my apartment with the kind of brittle cheerfulness that suggested she didn't actually care about the answer. Nicholas barely spoke, just watched me with eyes that reminded me of a snake sizing up a rat. "Daddy, you barely touched your wine." Clementine leaned forward, lifting a specific bottle, not the one Nicholas had poured from earlier. "Here, let me pour you more. This vintage is special." "I'm fine with water, actually." I covered my glass with my hand. Nicholas's jaw tightened. "Your daughter went to trouble finding this wine specifically for you. Don't insult her effort." The edge in his voice made something click in my brain. I watched Clementine's hand tremble slightly as she set down the bottle. They were pushing too hard. Why? My phone rang, shattering the tension. Unknown number flashed on the screen. "Excuse me." I stood, stepping away from the table into the hallway. My finger swiped to answer. "Hello? You're in danger." The voice came through hoarse, urgent, deliberately distorted. "Run and don't tell your daughter. Trust me. Go now." My blood turned to ice water. "Who is this? What are you—" "No time. Leave." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my accounting brain trying to process variables that didn't make sense. But my body understood before my mind caught up. My heart hammered against my ribs. My hands went cold. I turned back toward the dining room. Clementine and Nicholas were frozen, watching me with identical expressions of strained patience. The wine bottle sat between them, dark liquid catching candlelight. Poison, the word materialized in my thoughts, clear as typed text. They wanted to poison me. "Daddy!" Clementine's voice pitched high. "Everything okay?" I clutched my chest, gasping. It wasn't hard to fake. Terror does most of the acting for you. "Can't breathe." "Sit down, old man." Nicholas moved toward me fast, too fast, his hands reaching. "Let me help you." "Don't touch me." I shoved him hard, using strength I didn't know I still had. He stumbled backward against the wall. Clementine's mouth opened in surprise or fury. I couldn't tell which. I lurched toward the door, my coat still on, because some part of me had never fully committed to staying. My fingers fumbled with the lock. Behind me, I heard Nicholas swearing, heard Clementine saying my name in a voice that could have been concern or anger. Then I was outside, rain hitting my face like needles, running to my car with legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. I locked the doors the moment I got inside, started the engine with shaking hands. In the rearview mirror, I saw them standing on the porch, not running after me, not calling for help, just standing there, side by side, watching me drive away with expressions I couldn't read from this distance. But I could imagine them. Could picture the calculations happening behind their eyes, the plans adjusting, the disappointment that their father, their Mark, had somehow slipped away. I drove through rain-slicked streets, not heading back to my apartment, but circling, my mind racing faster than the windshield wipers, the unknown caller, the wine, Nicholas's aggression, Clementine's trembling hands. My phone rang again. Same unknown number. I pulled into an empty grocery store parking lot, rain drumming on the roof like accusations. My finger hovered over the screen. Every instinct I'd honed over 40 years of auditing told me to answer, to gather information, to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. I touched the screen. Yes, they wanted to poison you. The distorted voice again, but calmer now, more controlled. Get somewhere safe. Don't trust them. Wait, I started to say, but the line went dead. I sat in the darkness of my car, rain hammering overhead, staring at the phone in my hand. The call history showed 2 entries from unknown number, 2 warnings, 2 interventions. Someone out there knew what my daughter was planning. Someone had decided to save my life. But who? And why? The vulnerable father who'd walked into that house an hour ago was gone. Something colder had taken his place. Something that knew how to track money, how to find patterns, how to build cases from fragments of evidence. They'd tried to kill me. My daughter, my Clementine, had looked me in the eye and poured poison into a wine glass meant for my lips. I started the engine again, wiping rain from my face with hands that had stopped shaking. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked older, harder. The face of a man who just learned the worst truth possible, and the face of a man who would make them answer for it. I drove home through streets that seemed emptier than they should be on Christmas Eve. The apartment building materialized through rain and darkness, like a fortress I wasn't sure would hold. I parked in my usual spot, sat for a moment gathering myself, then climbed the stairs with legs that felt disconnected from my body. Inside, I locked everything. Deadbolt, chain. The little sliding lock I'd never bothered with before. Then I stood with my back against the door, breathing hard, listening to my pulse hammer in my ears. The apartment looked the same, cluttered kitchen table, worn couch, lamp casting yellow light across faded carpet. But it felt different now. Not a home, just a place to hide while I figured out what came next. My phone sat in my coat pocket like a live grenade. I pulled it out, set it on the kitchen table, and stared at it the way you'd stare at evidence of something impossible. 2 calls from unknown number, 2 warnings that had saved my life. I walked to the bathroom, flipped on the harsh fluorescent light, and looked at myself in the mirror. Same face I'd seen this morning, same gray beard, same tired eyes. But I could taste something bitter on my lips. Wine. That special vintage Clementine had been so insistent, I drink. I touched my tongue to my lips, felt the residue there. Not much, I'd barely sipped during the toast, before the phone call interrupted, but enough. Enough to know the caller had been telling the truth. Back in the kitchen, I found a clean napkin from the drawer. Carefully, methodically, I wiped the residue from my mouth onto the white cloth. A faint purple stain appeared. I folded the napkin, slipped it into a plastic storage bag, and sealed it. Then I wrote on the bag with a marker, December 21st, 2024, suspected poisoning attempt. My hand didn't shake when I wrote it. That surprised me. I put the bag in the back of my refrigerator's vegetable drawer, behind the wilting lettuce I kept meaning to throw away. Not perfect evidence preservation, but better than nothing. 40 years of auditing had taught me. Document everything, preserve the paper trail, assume you'll need proof later. Rain continued its assault on the windows. I made coffee because sleep seemed impossible, sat at the table with a legal pad, and started writing down everything I could remember. Times, exact words from the phone calls, Clementine's expressions, Nicholas's body language, the wine bottle's label. Somewhere around 3 a.m, I realized I'd filled 4 pages with observations written in the neat columns I'd perfected over decades of accounting work. Christmas morning arrived gray and cold. I dozed in the chair, head on the table, legal pad stuck to my cheek. The doorbell woke me, sharp and insistent. I checked the peephole. Clementine and Nicholas stood in the hallway, wearing matching expressions of what I supposed was concern. Clementine had changed into jeans and a sweater. Nicholas wore his usual scowl beneath a forced smile. I opened the door to the length of the chain, blocking the gap with my body. Daddy, we were so worried. Clementine leaned forward, trying to see past me into the apartment. Are you okay? What happened last night? I'm fine. My voice came out flat, emotionless. Just needed rest. Nicholas shifted his weight, and I saw his jaw tighten. You scared us half to death. We should take you to a doctor. Open the door. Something about the way he said it, like an order, not a suggestion, made my spine straighten. I said I'm fine. Go home, Nicholas. But Daddy, we need to talk about... Clementine started. There's nothing to discuss. I looked directly at her, watched her pupils contract. Goodbye, Clementine. I closed the door before she could respond, heard them standing there for a long moment. Then Nicholas's voice, low and angry. Forget it. Let's go. Through the peephole, I watched them walk away. At the building's entrance, Nicholas slammed the door hard enough that I heard it from 3 floors up. Clementine touched his arm, said something I couldn't hear. He shrugged her off. They didn't look worried. They looked frustrated. 3 days passed like walking through fog. I went to work at the small accounting firm, where I did part-time consulting, filed paperwork, reviewed spreadsheets, acted normal while my brain worked overtime, analyzing what I knew versus what I could prove. On the 3rd day, December 28th, around noon, my phone rang. Unknown number. This time I answered on the first ring. Yes. They wanted to poison you. The same distorted voice, but calmer now, matter of fact. Be careful. Don't trust them. Wait. I gripped the phone hard enough my knuckles went white. Who are you? How do you know this? Watch your back. A pause then. They're desperate. The line went dead. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the phone's call history. 3 warnings, 3 interventions from someone who knew things they shouldn't know. But the 3rd call had given me something the first 2 hadn't. Confirmation. Not just that I was in danger, but that the danger was real, ongoing, motivated by something deeper than I'd understood. They're desperate. I pulled out my legal pad, started a new page, wrote across the top, why? Clementine had been distant for months before the invitation. Nicholas had asked about life insurance. They'd questioned my will, but I'd assumed it was just vultures circling, waiting for an old man to die naturally. The word desperate suggested something else. Not just greed, urgency, need. I opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, checked my life insurance policy details. $850,000. Clementine was still listed as beneficiary. I'd never changed it after Margaret died. That was motive for murder, but desperation meant they couldn't wait, couldn't let nature take its course. Something was pushing them, forcing their hand. I needed to know what. I picked up my phone, opened a browser, typed, Private Investigator, Portland, Oregon. The results filled my screen like a roadmap to answers I needed. I started reading reviews, taking notes in my pad, cross-referenced ratings with pricing, found one that looked promising. Eric Harper, former police detective, specialized in domestic cases and fraud investigation. I dialed the number before I could second-guess myself. Harper Investigations. A gruff voice, tired but alert. My name is Otis Andrews. I need someone to investigate my daughter and her husband. The words felt strange in my mouth, like speaking a foreign language. I believe they tried to kill me. A pause on the other end. Then, I have time tomorrow at 10. Can you come to my office? I'll be there, I said. After I hung up, I sat looking at the list I'd written earlier. Evidence needed, questions unanswered, threats unresolved. I added a 5th item at the bottom, pressing the pen hard enough to indent the paper beneath. Make them pay. The words looked stark against the white page. Permanent. Final. I stared at them for a long time, waiting for guilt or hesitation or mercy to surface. Waiting to feel like the father who'd once pushed his daughter on swings and bandaged her scraped knees. Nothing came, just cold clarity, and the certain knowledge that the daughter I'd loved had decided I was worth more dead than alive. Tomorrow, I'd start building the case against her. Tonight, I'd make sure I survived long enough to see it through. Eric Harper's office sat above a Vietnamese restaurant in northeast Portland, and the smell of faux broth rose through the floorboards. The space was small, cluttered with file boxes and a desk that had seen better decades. Eric himself looked like he'd seen better decades too. Mid-50s, weathered face mapped with lines, eyes that evaluated me with the flat assessment of someone who'd heard everything twice. I'd spent 2 days preparing for this meeting, made an appointment, compiled notes, rehearsed how to explain that my daughter wanted me dead without sounding paranoid. "Mr. Andrews," he gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Tell me what's going on." I did. Methodically, chronologically, the way I'd present findings in an audit, the phone call invitation, the Christmas dinner, the wine, the anonymous warnings, the door confrontation. I left out nothing, including my own doubts about whether I could prove any of it. When I finished, Eric leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You understand, I can't break any laws for you, but if they're doing something illegal, I'll find it. Just watch them." I pulled out the envelope I'd prepared. Photos of Clementine and Nicholas I'd printed from old files, their address, Nicholas's work schedule, Clementine's retail job location. "Document everything. I need to know what I'm dealing with." He looked through the photos, nodded slowly. "This will run about $2,500 for the first week. Surveillance, background checks, financial investigation if I can access public records." I wrote the check without hesitation, handed it across the desk along with the envelope. Eric pocketed the check, met my eyes. "Mr. Andrews, if you suspect attempted murder, you should go to police." "With what proof?" I kept my voice steady. "A napkin and a phone call? No. I need solid evidence first." "Fair enough." He stood, extended his hand. "I'll be in touch." After leaving his office, I sat in my car for a few minutes, hands on the steering wheel, wondering if I'd just wasted $2,500 chasing ghosts. Then I drove to the storage unit on the east side, where I'd stashed boxes from the house when Clementine and Nicholas moved in. The unit smelled like cardboard and dust. I pulled the chain to turn on the single bulb, scanned the stacked boxes until I found the ones labeled N. Ruiz Office. Nicholas had left behind file folders when they moved into my house. Business documents, contracts, paperwork he'd said he'd pick up later. He never had. At the time, I'd thought nothing of it. Now, I wondered what secrets lived in those forgotten pages. Back at my apartment, I spread the contents across my living room floor. Loan applications, credit card statements, real estate contracts for deals that had fallen through, letters from collection agencies. I grabbed a highlighter and my calculator, then did what I'd done for 40 years. Followed the money. 2 hours later, the picture emerged like a photograph developing in chemicals. Nicholas had invested in a house-flipping scheme with a partner who'd vanished with the capital. He'd borrowed from credit cards to cover losses, then borrowed from shadier sources to pay the credit cards. Gambling receipts, casino, poker games suggested where the money went after that. I totaled it up 3 times to be sure. $95,000 in debt, most of it to people whose names appeared on no official documents, which meant they weren't the forgiving type. The week crawled by. I went to work, came home, waited for Eric's call, lay awake at night thinking about my daughter's voice saying I'd scared them half to death when I'd survived their murder attempt. On January 6th, Eric called. "Can you meet me? Downtown, that coffee shop on Morrison." 30 minutes later, I slid into the booth across from him. He had a folder, thick with papers, and an expression that told me he'd found what I'd paid him to find. "Your son-in-law has a gambling problem," Eric said without preamble. "Serious one. He's at an underground game in the industrial district every Tuesday and Friday. Word is, he owes money to some very unpleasant people." "How much?" "Can't say exactly, but based on what I've observed and what I've heard." He paused. "Let's just say your life insurance would cover it nicely." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "And my daughter?" Eric slid a small digital recorder across the table. "This was legally obtained. Oregon's a one-party consent state, which means if one person in a conversation knows they're being recorded, it's admissible. My associate was the one person." "What's on it?" "Listen for yourself." He pressed play, static, then voices. Nicholas first. "If the old man would finally die, all our problems would be solved. Insurance money, house, everything." Then Clementine, my daughter, her voice hesitant but clear. "Don't say it like that, but yes, we need that money, Nicholas." Eric let it play for another minute. Nicholas complaining about debt collectors, Clementine asking if they could speed things up, Nicholas laughing darkly and saying he was working on it. I sat frozen, the coffee cup in my hand forgotten, hearing her voice, hearing her agree, hearing her reduced to someone who saw her father as a financial solution. Eric reached across and stopped the recording. "I'm sorry you had to hear that, but now you know. Now I know exactly who they are." My voice came out like ice cracking. He slid the folder across. Full report, surveillance photos, financial records I could access publicly. Recordings in there too, on a USB drive. It's yours. I took the folder, held it against my chest like a shield. "Thank you. One more thing." Eric's expression softened slightly. "Whatever you're planning to do with this, be smart about it. Don't let anger make you stupid." "I'm an accountant," I said. "We don't do stupid. We do methodical." Back home, I spread Eric's report across my kitchen table. Surveillance photos showed Nicholas entering a warehouse at night, emerging hours later looking defeated. Financial documents confirmed the debt spiral. The recording sat on the USB drive, waiting. I picked up my phone, scrolled through contacts, found the estate attorney I'd used when Margaret died. I needed to change my will immediately, cut them out completely before they got another chance. But even as I stared at the attorney's number, I knew that wasn't enough. Defensive moves wouldn't satisfy the cold thing that had taken root in my chest, where fatherly love used to live. I set the phone down, opened my laptop instead, typed Oregon inheritance law, read about how property transferred upon death, then how to legally evict tenants, studied the process for reclaiming my house, then financial fraud prosecution, learned what constituted prosecutable offenses. The research continued into the night. Rain drummed against the windows. My coffee went cold in the cup. I didn't notice. I wasn't just building a defense anymore. I was building something bigger, a plan that would strip them of everything they'd tried to murder me to get. A plan that would make them understand exactly what they'd lost when they decided I was worth more dead than alive. The folder from Eric sat open beside my laptop. Clementine's face smiled up at me from a surveillance photo, unaware she was being watched. "You wanted me gone?" I whispered to the photograph. "Now, you're going to wish I'd stayed." 3 days of research had brought me here, the 14th floor of a downtown Portland high-rise, sitting across a polished conference table from Delphine Connor, a state attorney. Rain streaked the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her, turning the city into an impressionist painting of gray and shadow. I'd spent those 3 days reading reviews, checking credentials, preparing my presentation. Now, I spread Eric's investigation report across her table, like playing cards in a winning hand. Surveillance photos, financial documents, the USB drive containing that damning recording. Delphine was early 50s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She picked up the transcript of the recording first, read it twice without expression, then set it down precisely where she'd found it. "Mr. Andrews, I understand your suspicion." Her voice carried the controlled sympathy of someone who'd heard worse. "But legally, we can't prove attempted murder with this. The recording discusses your death hypothetically. The napkin residue, without witnesses or medical documentation from that night, won't convince prosecutors." I'd expected this. Still felt like swallowing glass. "So, they get away with trying to kill me? Criminally? Probably." She leaned forward, and something shifted in her expression. "But we can make their lives very difficult through civil means. Change your will, remove them from insurance, evict them from your property. They wanted your money? Make sure they never see a cent." Cold satisfaction spread through my chest. "How quickly can we do this?" She checked her calendar, tablet screen reflecting in her eyes. "Will revision today. Insurance change immediate. Eviction notice. Oregon requires 30 days, but we file paperwork now." "Do it," I said. "All of it." The next 2 hours felt like surgery. Delphine's paralegal brought forms, witnessed signatures, notarized documents while I rewrote my future in ink and legal language. The will was first. I watched my pen cross out Clementine's name, the daughter I'd raised, loved, believed in, and write instead, Portland Community Foundation, Oregon Food Bank, local literacy programs, organizations that actually helped people instead of plotting to kill them. My hand didn't shake. "Are you certain?" Delphine asked, watching me. "This is permanent." She tried to poison me for money. I met her eyes. "I'm certain." Next came the life insurance. I called the company from Delphine's conference room, her presence lending weight to the transaction. The representative on the line processed my request with efficient indifference. $850,000, no longer Clementine's safety net. New beneficiary, same charities that would inherit everything else. Effective immediately, the representative confirmed. You should receive documentation within 5 business days. Thank you, I said, and meant it. The eviction notice was last. Delphine drafted it herself, reviewing Oregon tenant law while I waited. 30 days notice, legally required. But the clock started today. They'll fight this, she said, printing the final version. Be prepared for that. I am. At the post office on my way home, I sent the notice certified mail, signature required, created a paper trail that would hold up in court. The postal worker processed it without interest, unaware she was handling the first strike in a war my daughter had started. Back in my apartment, I waited, made coffee, reviewed the documents Delphine had given me, copies of everything, organized in a folder that felt heavy with finality. My phone rang at 6:15 that evening, Clementine's name on the screen. I let it ring twice while I composed myself, then answered. What is this? Her voice came through shrill, trembling with something between panic and rage. An eviction notice? Daddy, you can't be serious. Where are we supposed to go? How could you do this to your own daughter? I know what you planned, Clementine. Silence. Then, you're being cruel. We've done nothing wrong. You're paranoid and... The recording says otherwise. I kept my voice level, emotionless. You and Nicholas wanted me dead for insurance money. I know what you planned. Get out of my house. I ended the call, set the phone on the table gently. No shaking hands, no second thoughts. Just the cold certainty that I'd done what needed doing. The phone buzzed, text message from Clementine. You'll regret this. I screenshot it, saved it to the evidence folder on my laptop. Then another text, different number, but Nicholas's tone unmistakable. This isn't over, old man. Screenshot, save, document everything. I called Eric Harper. They're going to fight back. I need you to keep watching them. Something tells me they'll make mistakes when they're desperate. Already on it, Eric said. Desperate people get sloppy. We'll catch it. After hanging up, I pulled out my legal pad, wrote at the top, next steps, prepare for counterattack. Underlined it twice. Thunder rolled across the Portland sky, rattling my windows. Storm coming, outside and in. But I was ready. For the first time since that Christmas Eve dinner, I felt like I held the high ground. They'd tried to kill me for money I'd worked 40 years to save. Now that money would do some good in the world, and they'd get nothing but the consequences of their choices. I stood at the window, watching rain begin again. Somewhere out there, in my house that would soon be mine again, Clementine and Nicholas were realizing their plan had collapsed. The father they'd dismissed as an easy mark had become something else entirely, a problem they couldn't solve. The certified letter arrived exactly 1 week later, on a gray January morning that matched my mood. I knew what it was before opening it. Delphine had warned me to expect retaliation. Still, seeing it in formal legal language made it real. Complaint for breach of oral contract and unjust enrichment. Clementine Andrews and Nicholas Ruiz, plaintiffs. Otis Andrews, defendant. They were suing me, claiming I'd promised them the house, that they'd invested thousands in repairs and renovations, that evicting them violated an oral agreement. All lies. But legally filed lies, which meant I had to respond. I called Delphine immediately. They're claiming you promised them the house verbally, she said, matter of fact, that they paid for renovations. It's standard desperation tactics. It's all lies. I pulled up my banking records on the laptop, already searching for payment receipts. I have proof I paid for everything. Then we'll prove it in court. Her voice carried the calm of someone who'd fought these battles before. Keep documenting everything they do. Anything threatening, anything harassing. Photograph it, save it, forward it to me. I didn't have to wait long. The next morning, I found the first note taped to my apartment door. Block letters on white paper. Drop the eviction or else. I photographed it with my phone's timestamp app before touching it. Sealed it in a plastic bag. Added it to my growing evidence collection. That afternoon, I installed a small wireless security camera above my door. The kind that records to cloud storage, sends alerts to your phone. $40 at the electronics store, worth every penny for the documentation it would provide. 2 days later, I came home to find my mailbox pried open, mail scattered across the apartment lobby floor. I recorded video of the damage before touching anything, then called the building manager to file a report. "Probably kids," the manager said, but we both knew better. I called Eric. "They're escalating. I need you to dig deeper. Find everything on Nicholas, every transaction, every deal, every lie." "That'll take time," Eric warned, "and money." "I have both." I was past caring about cost. This had become about more than protecting myself. It was about making sure they paid for what they'd tried to do. "Find it all." Eric delivered a week later. We met at the same coffee shop where he'd first played me that recording. This time, the folder he slid across the table was thicker, heavier with documents that would change everything. "Your son-in-law's into something bigger." Eric kept his voice low, though the nearest customers were 3 tables away. "He's been running a real estate scam, fake properties, shell companies, the works." I leaned forward. "How much are we talking?" "At least $180,000 from 6 different investors." He opened the folder, revealing corporate filings, bank statements, victim statements. "Sold them properties that don't exist. Set up LLCs with fake addresses, forged documents, took deposits and disappeared. Classic fraud." I felt something shift in my chest. Not surprise. Nicholas had always struck me as fundamentally dishonest, but cold satisfaction at having this confirmed with evidence that could put him in prison. "That's criminal," I said slowly. "That's prison time." "Exactly." Eric nodded. "Question is, what do you want to do with this?" I thought about it, about Clementine's panicked phone call, about Nicholas's threatening texts, about them suing me while simultaneously trying to intimidate me into dropping the eviction, about the Christmas dinner where they'd tried to poison me for money they desperately needed. "We take it to the authorities," I said finally. "But not yet. Let them dig themselves deeper with the lawsuit and harassment. Then we bury them completely." Eric's expression suggested approval. "Strategic. Give them enough rope." "Exactly." Over the next few days, the harassment continued. More notes appeared under my door, each one photographed and preserved. My car got keyed in the parking garage. That got reported to both police and my insurance company, creating yet another official record. Each incident made me angrier, but it also made me more careful, more methodical. I treated each piece of evidence like I'd treated discrepancies in ledgers during my auditing career, documented, categorized, cross-referenced, built a timeline that showed escalating harassment over weeks. Nicholas's desperation was making him sloppy, and sloppiness created evidence. I spread Eric's fraud investigation across my kitchen table late one evening. Documents detailed every fraudulent transaction, names of victims, a retired teacher, a young couple saving for their first home, an immigrant family trying to invest in America. Nicholas had stolen their dreams along with their money. Bank records showed the money flowing through shell companies before disappearing into accounts Nicholas thought were untraceable. Email chains revealed him lying to victims, forging inspection reports, creating elaborate fictions about properties that existed only on paper. He'd left a trail like breadcrumbs, sloppy, arrogant, exactly what I needed. I picked up my phone, scrolled to the prosecutor's office contact information I'd saved weeks ago. My finger hovered over the call button. Not yet. I set the phone down, opened my laptop instead, typed an email to Eric. "Continue surveillance. Document any additional fraud activities. Prepare full report for authorities. Timeline, 2 weeks. Give them rope to hang themselves with." While I was typing, another note slid under my door. I heard it scrape against the floor, saw the white paper appear. Without getting up, I finished the email, added, "Also document all harassment, building felony stalking case." Sent it. Then I stood, photographed the new note through the door's peephole to show when it arrived, then picked it up with a tissue. This one was more aggressive. "Last warning." I added it to the evidence folder. 17 documented incidents now. Returned to my laptop. Pulled up the prosecutor's contact list. Read through the names, the specialties, the cases they had handled. Found the one who specialized in fraud and financial crimes. Soon, very soon, I'd make that call. But not until the civil lawsuit was filed. Not until Nicholas committed fully to intimidating me. Not until they believed they might actually win this fight. Then I'd show them what losing really looked like. Outside, rain continued its endless percussion against the windows. Inside, I reviewed documents that would destroy them, not just financially, but criminally. They'd tried to kill me for money. Now they'd lose everything for money they'd already stolen. The symmetry felt appropriate. Justice felt close. I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, went to bed with the satisfaction of someone who'd spent 40 years learning that revenge, like accounting, was all about the details. 2 weeks of strategic patience brought me here, a stark government building in downtown Portland, sitting across from Assistant District Attorney Marcus Webb. 3 folders sat between us on his scarred desk, evidence that would destroy Nicholas Ruiz completely. I'd spent those 2 weeks letting Nicholas dig himself deeper. 17 documented harassment incidents, a lawsuit proceeding through courts, every action creating more rope for him to hang himself with. Now I was ready to pull the lever. This is comprehensive. Webb flipped through the first folder, his expression shifting from professional skepticism to genuine focus. Shell corporations, forged documents, wire transfers. How did you obtain all this? Licensed private investigator. I kept my voice level, businesslike. Everything obtained legally. The victims are willing to testify. He nodded slowly, already thinking several moves ahead. We'll need to coordinate with the FBI on the interstate components. Mr. Andrews, your son-in-law is looking at serious prison time. He's not my son-in-law anymore. I met his eyes. He's a criminal who tried to murder me for inheritance money. Webb's eyebrows rose, but he didn't interrupt as I explained. The Christmas dinner, the poisoning attempt, the anonymous warnings that saved my life, the recording of them discussing my death as a financial solution. That's not something we can prosecute without physical evidence, Webb said carefully. But the fraud case? This is solid. Give me 48 hours to review everything and present to the grand jury. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in months, not happy. Happiness seemed too simple for what I felt. More like watching a complicated equation finally balance. 3 days later, my phone rang, Webb's name on the screen. We're moving forward, he said. Arrest warrant issued this morning. FBI's joining the investigation. Wire transfers cross state lines. Shell companies registered in Nevada and California. Federal wire fraud elevates this significantly. Why does federal matter? I asked, though I could guess. Different league of consequences. State charges might get him 5 years. Federal? We're looking at 15 to 20, plus restitution. Webb paused. They're executing the warrant this afternoon. Thought you'd want to know. I did want to know. Hung up and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the phone. Somewhere across town, Nicholas's last hours of freedom were ticking away. The news alert appeared on my phone at 4:30. Local real estate manager arrested in a $180,000 fraud scheme. Below it, Nicholas's booking photo, the mugshot angle making everyone look guilty even when they weren't. In his case, the camera wasn't lying. At 6:15, someone pounded on my apartment door, heavy, urgent, desperate. Through the peephole, I saw Clementine. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in the 2 weeks since I'd hung up on her. Hair disheveled, eyes red and swollen, mascara tracked down her cheeks. I opened the door to the length of the chain. "Daddy, please!" Her voice broke on the word. "They arrested Nicholas. You have to help us. Drop the charges. He made mistakes, but he's not a bad person." "He committed fraud," I said flatly. "He stole from people, and you both planned to poison me." Her face went white. "What? No, we never—" "I have the recording, Clementine." I let each word fall like a stone into still water. If the old man would finally die, all our problems would be solved. Your words. She collapsed against the doorframe, sobbing. "We were just talking. We didn't mean it. Please, Daddy, I'm your daughter." Something flickered in my chest. Old habit. The instinct to comfort her when she cried, same as when she was small and scraped her knees. But then I remembered the wine glass, the artificial sweetness in her voice on the phone, the way she'd looked at me across the Christmas dinner table while planning my death. My daughter died when she decided killing me was acceptable. I kept my voice steady. "You're just someone who looks like her?" Her face crumpled. She turned and stumbled down the hallway, one hand on the wall for balance. I watched until she disappeared around the corner. Then I closed the door, locked it, and returned to my life. The eviction hearing was scheduled for Valentine's Day, appropriate in its way. Delphine and I sat at the plaintiff's table while Clementine and Nicholas's attorney argued that they'd invested thousands in the house, made improvements, deserved compensation. Delphine stood, laid out bank records showing I'd paid for every repair, every renovation, every improvement. Receipts going back 2 years, contractor statements, canceled checks. The judge's gavel fell at 11:30. The court finds no merit in defendant's claims, 10 days to vacate the property, case dismissed. On the courthouse steps, Delphine handed me the eviction order. Rain had stopped. February sun broke through Portland clouds for the first time in days. "They have 10 days, she said. Then the sheriff removes them if necessary. My phone buzzed. Text from Eric. Nicholas made bail. Brother posted $50,000. He's out. I read it twice. Expected but concerning. A man facing federal prison time. Reputation destroyed. Nothing left to lose. Dangerous combination. I replied, keep surveillance active. Document everything. Delphine noticed my expression. Problem? Nicholas is out on bail. I pocketed the phone. Man who tried to kill me, now facing prison, just got temporary freedom. Her face tightened. Be careful, Otis. I will be. But walking to my car, I checked the locks twice, looked over my shoulder more than necessary. Nicholas was desperate, and desperate people didn't follow rules. They broke them, violently if necessary. I'd won the legal battles. Now I just had to survive long enough to see him convicted. 5 days later, I sat in my car across the street from the house, my house, watching a moving truck being loaded. Nicholas carried boxes down the front walk, movements sharp with barely contained rage. Clementine followed with smaller items, face blank with shock. Their life, reduced to cardboard and tape. I'd parked a block away, visible but not obvious. Wanted to see this moment. Needed to watch them leave the house they'd tried to steal by murdering me. Nicholas's bail conditions allowed him to gather belongings before trial, but bail couldn't restore his reputation. Eric's report from yesterday detailed the collapse. Every client terminated their contracts within 48 hours of the arrest. Real estate license suspended pending investigation. Business bank accounts frozen. The fraud charges had done what I'd hoped, destroyed him professionally before the trial even started. And the creditors had circled immediately. $95,000 in debt. No income, no prospects. Bankruptcy was inevitable, though it wouldn't discharge the restitution he'd owe once convicted. The moving truck pulled away at noon. Nicholas and Clementine followed in their car. Not the nice sedan Nicholas had driven before, but something older, cheaper, bought in desperation. I watched them disappear around the corner, then drove home. My phone started buzzing around 6 that evening. Text after text, all from Clementine. This is your fault. You destroyed our lives. Nicholas is facing prison because of you. I've lost everything. You're supposed to be my father. I read the first few with complete detachment. No mention of trying to kill me. No apology. No acknowledgement that any of this was consequence rather than cruelty. Just blame, projected outward, refusing to land where it belonged. How can you be so cruel? I hope you're happy now. I blocked her number, watched her name disappear from my contacts, felt nothing but relief. The next day I met Eric at a quiet diner on the east side. He slid a photograph across the table. Elderly Asian man, maybe 70. Kind face weathered by time. 72-year-old retired postal worker, Eric said quietly. Lives next door to your house. Harold Chen. Heard everything through the wall. They were arguing about the plan Christmas Eve afternoon. I stared at the photo, processing. He heard them planning to poison me and called to warn me. Saved your life. Eric nodded. But terrified of your son-in-law. Nicholas has a history of threatening people. Harold was afraid if Nicholas found out, he'd retaliate. Something warm moved through my chest. A stranger had risked himself to save someone he'd never met. In a world where most people looked away, Harold Chen had acted. Twice. Warning calls on Christmas Eve and days after. I want to thank him, I said. Properly, but keep it anonymous, protect him from Nicholas. That evening, I prepared an envelope, $5,000 in cash. Not enough for a life, but what I could reasonably give without drawing attention. I included a note written in block letters. Thank you for saving my life. Stay safe. Eric delivered it the next afternoon, reported back from a coffee shop downtown. Harold accepted it, started crying. Eric's voice carried unusual gentleness. Said, and I quote, "I couldn't sleep knowing what I heard. Had to warn him. Didn't know what else to do." 5,000 isn't enough for a life, I said quietly. But it's what I can do. It's more than most would do. Eric closed his notebook. Speaking of consequences, your daughter lost her job. Retail store terminated her yesterday. Scandal association. Their only income source, gone. The financial collapse was complete. Nicholas facing federal charges, business destroyed, creditors circling. Clementine unemployed, reputation tarnished by association, forced from my house into some cheap apartment where thin walls would let them hear their neighbors. Ironic, given how this all started. I felt no guilt about their suffering, only quiet satisfaction that justice functioned when you understood how to use it. That night, I stood at my apartment window watching city lights reflect on glass. My phone sat silent, Clementine blocked, the house emptied and secured. Nicholas facing trial in 3 months, date marked on my calendar in red pen, June 2025. Eric's final surveillance report sat on my kitchen table. Nicholas and Clementine had rented an apartment in a rough neighborhood east of Powell Boulevard, the kind of place where police sirens were background noise and security bars covered windows. Fall from grace, measured in zip codes. I opened my laptop, searched the news. The fraud story had gained traction. Real estate manager's victims speak out about a $180,000 scheme. Reporters had found the defrauded investors, the retired teacher, the young couple, the immigrant family, all of them telling their stories, faces blurred for privacy, but voices clear with betrayal, public shame layered onto legal consequences, complete and thorough. I closed the laptop. My reflection stared back from the dark screen. Older man, harder now, lines deeper around my eyes. But alive. Alive because a stranger named Harold Chen had cared enough to act. I pulled out a sheet of paper, wrote carefully. If you ever need anything, contact Eric Harper. Added Eric's phone number. Sealed it in an envelope addressed to Harold, care of Eric's office. Harold deserved more than money. He deserved protection. A lifeline if Nicholas ever discovered his identity. Justice required protecting the righteous, along with punishing the guilty. I set the envelope aside, turned off the lights, and went to bed. 3 months until Nicholas's trial. 3 months until the final chapter of this revenge closed. But the important work was finished. They'd tried to kill me for money. Now they had nothing. No money, no house, no future beyond prison and poverty. Margaret would have said I was being harsh. But Margaret never knew what her daughter became after she died. Never knew the coldness that grew in Clementine, where love used to live. I'd simply responded in kind. June arrived with unusual sunshine for Portland, light streaming through the tall windows of Multnomah County Courthouse. I sat in the gallery's third row, hands folded in my lap, watching Nicholas Ruiz at the defendant's table. 4 months since he'd been arrested. 4 months of preliminary hearings, motions, legal maneuvering. Now, finally, verdict day. The courtroom was packed. 6 defrauded investors sat in the first 2 rows, faces tight with anticipation. Media filled the back. Curious observers scattered throughout. And Nicholas, diminished in a cheap suit, shoulders hunched, nothing like the arrogant man who'd threatened me through texts and vandalized my mailbox. The trial had lasted 3 weeks. I had attended when work allowed, watching the prosecution methodically dismantle Nicholas's life through evidence. Forged inspection reports, shell company documents, wire transfer records, email chains where he'd lied to victims with practiced ease. The victims had testified. An elderly couple who'd lost $40,000 from their retirement fund. A young family who'd saved $25,000 for a down payment. A small business owner bilked for $35,000. Each story the same pattern. Nicholas showing them photos of properties, providing fake documentation, collecting money, disappearing. His defense attorney had tried claiming misunderstandings, business mistakes, unfortunate circumstances. But you can't misunderstand 6 separate frauds with identical methods. The evidence didn't just speak, it shouted. The jury had deliberated for 2 days. Now they filed back in, faces carefully neutral, taking their seats. The foreman, middle-aged woman in a blazer, stood holding a paper that would determine Nicholas's future. On the count of wire fraud, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of document forgery? guilty. Count after count. Guilty, guilty, guilty. 11 times the word fell like a hammer, each one nailing Nicholas's coffin shut. I watched his face crumble, watched his shoulders slump as reality settled in. Prison, years of it, life permanently altered. His attorney touched his arm, said something quiet. Nicholas didn't respond. The judge, stern woman, maybe 60, graying hair pulled back, addressed the courtroom. Sentencing will proceed immediately. She reviewed the pre-sentencing report, read victim impact statements, then looked directly at Nicholas. Mr. Ruiz, your crimes were deliberate and extensive. You preyed on people's dreams of home ownership. 6 families trusted you, and you betrayed that trust systematically. She paused, letting the words land. 6 years federal prison. $200,000 restitution to your victims. You'll have time to consider the weight of your choices. Nicholas was given a moment to speak. He stood unsteadily. I made poor decisions. I'm sorry. The words came out hollow, rehearsed, empty of conviction. He didn't look at the victims, couldn't meet anyone's eyes. They remanded him immediately. Federal marshals approached. Nicholas glanced back once toward the gallery, not at me, just a general sweep of faces, then disappeared through the side door. Gone. Outside on the courthouse steps, media swarmed the victims. Microphones, cameras, reporters asking how they felt about the verdict. I walked past quietly, declined when someone tried to stop me. This wasn't my moment. Justice had been served. That was enough. A week later, a letter arrived at my apartment. Clementine's handwriting on the envelope. I recognized it immediately. Same looping script that used to address Mother's Day cards. I opened it carefully, unfolded 3 pages of cramped writing. Dad, I know you won't believe me, but I'm sorry. Nicholas convinced me you were being unreasonable. I didn't know about the poison. I swear. I was weak and desperate. Please forgive me. I've lost everything. You're all I have left. I read it once, then again, more slowly, searching for genuine remorse, finding instead the same pattern I'd seen at my apartment door, partial admission wrapped in excuse and deflection. She was sorry for consequences, not actions. Sorry she got caught, not that she'd done wrong. The recording existed, her voice saying his death would solve their problems. That wasn't Nicholas convincing her of anything. That was her agreeing, participating, planning. I folded the letter, walked to my filing cabinet, dropped it in the drawer labeled Closed Matters, slid the drawer shut. No response needed. No forgiveness offered. Some bridges, once burned, stay ashes. My phone rang that evening, Eric's name on the screen. Saw the sentencing, he said. 6 years, how are you holding up? Justice was served, that's what matters. Not everyone would have had the strength to see it through. His voice carried genuine respect. Most people would have crumbled or gotten vengeful. You stayed focused on justice. They tried to kill me, I said simply. I did what needed to be done. After hanging up, I checked the federal inmate registry online. Nicholas Ruiz, prisoner number assigned, facility location listed, status, remanded to custody. The system worked, evidence prevailed, consequences applied. I stood at my window, watching Portland's evening lights. Somewhere out there, Clementine had relocated, Eugene, according to her letter, trying to rebuild away from scandal. Somewhere in a federal prison, Nicholas was adjusting to the first night of 6 years. And here I stood, alive, vindicated, free. Text notification from Delphine. All legal matters concluded. We'll send final billing statement. You're free and clear. Free and clear. The words felt substantial. Final. I opened my calendar app, scrolled to tomorrow. Wrote a reminder, return to house, begin reclaiming. 4 months since I'd been inside. I'd avoided it deliberately. Let them move out. Let the sheriff confirm vacancy. Let time create distance. Now, it was mine again. Completely mine. Tomorrow I'd walk through those rooms, erase their presence, make it my sanctuary again. Not tonight. Tonight I'd let this chapter close properly. Tomorrow, a new one would begin. August sunshine warmed my face as I stood in the driveway, keyring heavy in my hand. The house looked the same from outside. Same bay windows, same oak tree where Clementine had built fairy houses as a child. But everything was different now. I'd spent July preparing for this moment, hired contractors for minor repairs, replaced the locks, had the carpets professionally cleaned, painted over their color choices, that awful gray they'd insisted on for the living room, now replaced with the warm beige Margaret and I had chosen originally. The apartment lease ended yesterday. Everything I owned fit in my car, and a small moving truck I'd driven myself. Not much accumulated in 8 months of exile. Now I was coming home. I unlocked the front door, new key, new deadbolt, and stepped inside. The house smelled of fresh paint and cleaning solution. Sunlight streamed through windows I'd had washed. My furniture was arranged the way I preferred it. Photos of Clementine had been removed, stored in a box in the garage. Not destroyed. I wasn't cruel. Just removed from view, out of sight, out of mind. I walked through each room slowly. Kitchen where I'd received that first warning call. Dining room where they'd tried to poison me. Living room where we'd once celebrated holidays. All mine again, all clean, all safe. The deck off the back called to me. I made coffee, carried it outside, settled into the chair I'd bought specifically for this space. The Portland skyline spread before me, familiar and comforting. "House looks good." Eric's voice came from behind me. I'd given him the new key yesterday, told him to stop by whenever. "You've made it yours again." That was the point. I gestured to the other chair. "Erase them, move forward." He sat, sipping from the travel mug he'd brought. We were quiet for a moment. Comfortable silence between friends. Somewhere along the way, Eric had stopped being just my investigator and become someone I genuinely valued. "Not everyone could do what you did," he said finally. "Most people would have crumbled or gotten vengeful. You stayed focused on justice." "They tried to kill me. I couldn't let that stand unanswered." Eric raised his mug. "To justice, then." I touched mine to his. "To survival." Later that afternoon, Delphine arrived carrying a thick folder, professional as always, but with warmth in her expression that suggested she'd come to respect me during these months. "Final paperwork." She settled into the chair Eric had vacated. "Everything's closed. Your will is updated and properly filed. Insurance beneficiaries confirmed. House title clear. You're legally bulletproof now." I reviewed the documents methodically. Insurance confirmation letter, will certification, property deed with no liens, court judgment showing restitution ordered. Everything in order, everything documented, everything permanent. "No outstanding issues?" I asked. "None." Delphine's voice carried certainty. "Nicholas is in federal prison. Clementine has no legal claim to anything. You're free. Thank you, Delphine, for everything. You made it easy by being thorough." She smiled slightly. "Best documented case I've handled. Every piece of evidence labeled, dated, cross-referenced. You should have been a lawyer." "I was an accountant," I said. "Same principle. Follow the numbers, document everything, prove your case." After she left, I sat alone on the deck as evening approached. The sun descended toward the horizon, painting clouds orange and pink. Portland spread below me, city I'd lived in for 40 years, city that had witnessed my lowest moment and my ultimate victory. The man who sat at that Christmas dinner was gone. He'd been too trusting, too hopeful, too naive about human nature. I was what remained. Harder, yes, more cautious, more strategic, but alive. They'd wanted my death. Instead, they'd orchestrated their own destruction, not through violence, through law, through evidence, through patience. That was real victory. My phone sat on the table beside me, dark and silent. No calls, no texts, no threats, just peace. I picked up my coffee, took a slow sip, set it down. Breathed deeply. The air smelled like summer. Neighbors' roses, cut grass, possibility. Somewhere south, Clementine was building a new life, carrying the weight of destroyed relationships and reputation. Somewhere in federal prison, Nicholas counted the first months of a 6-year sentence, reflecting on greed's cost. Somewhere nearby, Harold Chen lived quietly, anonymous hero unaware of the gratitude I'd sent through Eric. And here, in this house, on this deck, I existed, transformed, hardened, but fundamentally alive. Breeze carried warmth across my face. I thought about tomorrow, coffee with Eric in the morning, garden club meeting next week. I'd decided to join, needed new connections that weren't built on crisis. Maybe volunteer work after that. Life continuing forward, not the life I'd imagined. That man, that trusting father, that person who believed the best of people. He was gone forever. But this life, this harder, wiser, more careful existence, it was mine, completely mine, and that was enough. The sun touched the horizon, bleeding crimson and gold across the sky. I stood, stretched muscles that felt less tense than they had in months, collected my coffee cup, walked inside my house, legally and emotionally mine again. Behind me, sunset completed its descent. Darkness came, but I wasn't afraid of darkness anymore. I'd learned to navigate it, had learned that sometimes you had to walk through shadow to reach light on the other side. I closed the door, turned the new deadbolt, heard it click into place with solid finality, safe, secure, victorious. The story didn't end with celebration or fanfare. It ended with that quiet sound, deadbolt sliding home, barriers restored, sanctuary reclaimed. It ended with me standing in my hallway, lights warm around me, future stretching forward undefined but manageable. They'd tried to kill me over Christmas dinner 8 months ago. They'd failed, and in failing, they'd lost everything: freedom, reputation, family, future. While I stood here, in my home, with my life intact and my peace restored, justice hadn't just been served, it had been earned through intelligence, patience, and faith in systems designed to protect people like me from people like them. I walked to the living room, settled into my chair, picked up the book I'd been reading. Outside, Portland night settled in. Inside, warmth waited. My warmth, my peace, my victory. The end wasn't dramatic. It was simple. It was me, alive and whole, turning a page and continuing forward. That was enough. That was everything. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.